Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Chris. Today I wasn't really feeling the coffee and I made myself an Earl Grey tea. I wanted to talk today about how God always shows up just in time. And not that he's absent. What I mean to say is he is working on our behalf, he's working behind the scenes, and we don't always see it, but he is working and he's got that plan. A lot of you who know me know that I moved to here to BC from Nova Scotia. When I first moved to Nova Scotia, it was a time where I had to make a decision. It was tough decisions to move there. And with that came a scenario where I ended up moving to Nova Scotia without a job. Without knowing where my long-term place to stay was either. But God provided, I was there for probably 3 or 4 months before I even found a job, and that was tough. That was a tough scenario, and what ended up happening was really amazing. I went around giving out my resume as one does, and I had one last resume. I walked into an ice cream store, and they said, we're not hiring, and I just decided to ask them, where do you know of anywhere that is? And so they suggested they said, well, there's a burrito place that just opened across the road. So I went there. I walked in, and this was the last resume I was going to give out that day. I was tired. I gave out like 30 resumes that day. This was it for today. And I was a bit discouraged and stuff. So I go up to the cash. And, I'm like, what? I need some dinner anyways. I'll get a burrito or quesadilla or whatever. And so I go up to the cash and I say, hey, I was just wondering if I could leave a resume for the manager. And it just so happens that the guy behind the cash that day, at that time, was, in fact, the manager. And so he said, well, let's just do an interview right now. Well, before the interview was even finished, he was talking in terms of, okay, so when you come in, when you start working here, and he was ready. I was hired on the spot. And so I showed up, I showed up the next Thursday or something like that. And the rest was history there. And, within a couple of days, it was interesting because the owner had, he had a tattoo on his arm. The manager owner, he had a tattoo on his arm, and I wasn't sure what the language was that it was written in, but within a few days I found out that it was actually the Lord's Prayer written in our Armenian, I believe it was, and so it was just so fascinating, and I found out very quickly that this gentleman was a Christian, and that most of my coworkers were as well, as they were from his church. Basically, he opened up the place and was like, what, I need a staff. So he asked people at church, do you need a job? And so it worked out just in time. Now, fast forward a few months, business had gotten really slow. And my hours started out at full time, and then they were going out 1 or 2 days a week. And so I started putting out the feelers, started putting out the resumes again, and my boss knew this. He was understanding. He knew it was just going to be a temporary job anyways. And what ended up happening was a company called me. I didn't even apply for it, and I was like, is this a scam? But no, it wasn't. It was a temporary position, and a good position, paying well, and full-time hours, and near where I lived. And so, it was a similar thing. I went for an interview. They called me back the same day and decided to hire me. And so there I was, off to the next thing. And that was around December 2018. And then I started working there. Shortly after, Hannah and I got engaged. And then the Lord really started to increase a desire in our heart, or especially Hannah's heart, that BC was where we needed to go. Well, I hadn't quite caught, in my heart, I hadn't quite caught up yet. And so it was hard for me. I was like, things are going good here. I mean, I was in a temp position that was leading into a full-time position. And I was like, I don't know that I want to have to leave again, But I knew that God didn't want me to stay and just get too comfortable. He had a plan, he had a purpose. So it turns out that the company that I was with the temp position with, they had an office in Victoria as well. So I decided, after a lot of prayer, to see if they would let me transfer there. So at least I knew it would be a temporary position. It already was. But at least I would be able to look for work in Victoria on the ground. At least I would be able to get here. It was step one. So they agreed. The company agreed to transfer me out there. They did say, if you'd stayed in Halifax, we most likely would have hired you permanently. But we can't guarantee. We can pretty much guarantee that won't happen in Victoria. But that was fine, because I knew that's where God wanted us to go. So, came out here, and I looked around, and I was like, the first week of being here was like, oh, the blossoms, they're beautiful. This was April last year. It's like, oh, the blossoms, they're beautiful and everything. And the second week I was like, yeah, this place is dumb. I don't like Victoria at all. And I didn't know anyone, but people were so kind to me. I had people who took me in, friends of ours at our church in Halifax who had just moved to Halifax from Victoria. And so basically we switched places. I went and moved here, and some of their friends were able to help me out. From there, I was checking out probably every church in the area, and then I checked out Highway. And basically, how that came about was we had a mutual friend who the Jethmans knew. And basically, that's as close as I was to knowing somebody. So I was like, okay, I'll just go out there. And I had some great conversations with Pastor Sue when I first came to the church. And, she wanted to know more about me and why I came out here and all that kind of stuff. And I said, you know what, I don't know why I'm here. I really don't know. I know the long term, Hannah and I believe God wants us to work with kids and with teens. What that's going to look like in this season of life, I don't know. So, of course, Highway was looking for a next-gen coordinator at the time. And they weren't just looking to fill the gap. They were looking for the right person that God was leading to this position. Little did I know that was me. And, we ended up having more and more conversations. Pastor Ralph, Pastor Sue, myself, Hannah, eventually when she was able to make it here, because she was still back in Halifax finishing up her schooling. So eventually those conversations turned into formal interviews, and a lot of serious prayer on the part of the church, of the board, of myself, of Hannah, and but God made it plain. God made it evident eventually. And so here we are today. And why do I tell you all this story? The reason I'm telling you all of this is because on each of the points in this journey, whether it was finding that first burrito job in Halifax, whether it was, moving up to that temp job that eventually was able to lead me to Victoria, and then from there to get connected with somebody who's connected with someone back in Halifax and connected with someone here, so that then God could move me into the position that He wanted me to do here. God had a plan all along, and each step of the way, I got worried. What's next, God? I don't know what you're doing. What's the plan? Do you have any plan, God? And so I panicked. And there's a lot more details to that story of God's amazing providence showing through that I didn't even mention. But for the sake of time, my point is that He has a plan, and oftentimes it's just around the corner from our worry. Right when we get to our threshold where we think our breaking point is, God's just a little bit further, and He's got a plan and He's got it covered, and we just need to relax. So whatever you're worried about today, whether it's pandemic related, whether it's something that would be a concern for you with or without a pandemic, know that God has a plan just around the corner. And it's not as though he's just sitting there waiting to get to that corner. No, he's working behind the scenes and he's working on your behalf. He loves you. He has a plan for you. And even if it doesn't look like it, he has that plan. He has that next step. Ask him today what that next step he wants you to take is. Whether that step is to rest and wait because he's got it covered, or if there's an active step that he has for you to do. Just talk to him. I know he won't do you wrong. Anyways, those are my thoughts for today. I hope they're a blessing to you. Have a great day. God bless.